Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for sticking around for the final installment of this GovTalks track. My name is Jasmyne Epps, and I'm the QA lead on the Georgia Gov Interactive team. In my role, I diagnose and troubleshoot bugs on the platform, as well as assist in identifying areas of improvement. I also dabble in user experience design and analysis, mainly through accessibility and usability testing for our customers.
So, as a tester with experience working on projects ranging from internal enterprise solutions to web-based applications like ours, there's always this prevailing effort to really understand who it is that we're working for, who our audience is, why do we do what we do. So that's what I'm going to talk to you guys about today.
As a state agency, essentially everyone in Georgia is your audience. Every citizen could need any one of your services at some point. The goal of a digital strategy, however, is not to cast a large net in an attempt to appeal to everyone in Georgia, but rather to focus on your core user base and perfect your strategy to best accommodate them based on the service that you offer. But how do we do that? This is where understanding the needs, goals, and frustrations of the people we serve comes into play. What is it your user base wants to accomplish when they visit your site? What is it that they fear or hate most about interacting with a government agency?
And really, even some of the circumstances around why they're coming to your website. What are they going through in their life at that point to where they need to come to your website for a particular service?
It informs what content you serve up first, and most prominently, how you make decisions on the design, and even what platforms your agency develops for. Mobile browsing has officially surpassed desktop browsing, and we're moving towards screens not being a factor at all with devices like Amazon Echo and Google Home. So, informed decision making is essential to your digital strategy. Now, I know we all think we have an idea of who our audience is, or at least what audience we want to appeal to. Because we're thinking about a digital strategy, we tend to feel that we must cater to the millennials, not really taking into account the services we actually provide. So, without any research at all, we like to assume that our users are tech savvy people in their mid 20s to mid 30s with the latest and greatest technology on the fastest networks. When in actuality, our users look a lot more like this: individuals who more heavily rely on the convenient and simple access to government services. Maybe not the most tech savvy, and may not have access to the latest and greatest technology or internet speeds. So obviously, the needs, goals, and frustrations between the two groups are inherently different. So, how do we start to paint the picture of who our users are?
We can make a few assumptions based on something we already know, the information from call center data, information from interactions with our constituents in our offices. We can use questionnaires and try to gather this non-empirical data about our users, their age, their demographic, their gender, their job, even stuff like their personality and their interests and their lifestyle. All those things are really important to start painting that picture of who it is that we're building our site on.
Information based on what we already know about our users is a good place to start. This non empirical data is also the basis for building personas, which are realistic representations of our key audience, putting a name and a personality to the many faces of our users. Personas help to focus our decisions around the layout of our site's content and design by introducing that real world consideration to the conversation. It's also a very quick and inexpensive way to test and prioritize your organization's business goals throughout the development process. So rather than hiring an expensive market research firm, you can rely on things you already know about your users based on internal knowledge. I won't go into specific details about building personas. Like Kendra mentioned, we do offer content courses that will provide a deeper dive, but gathering that information to start painting that picture is essential. So after we've solidified a basis for our typical user, let's back it up with some actual data to support it. So I want to jump into a project that we did with Consumer Ed. They wanted a new design and layout with the goal of appealing to millennials who are looking to make their first major purchase, like a home or a car. This is what their site looked like before we started. They had a heavy emphasis on the Ask Ed initiative that would allow users to find answers to their questions. And they had somewhat of an idea of who their users were, or at least who they wanted them to be. But after some digging and analyzing their site, we discovered that their actual user base were those middle-aged users with families, individuals with aging parents who wanted to know more information about selecting the right nursing home. So before our team makes any decisions regarding the design, we have to conduct some empirical research backed by data, to come up with a strategy for tackling the changes to their design. Millennials could very well be within their demographic of users, but we need that data to back that up and make a more informed decision. So we use tools like Google Analytics, which allows us to get a pretty detailed snapshot of what's really going on with their site, like what devices people use, what pages are being viewed the most. We can even see users' physical location. This kind of information is helpful to determine where to focus your design and content efforts.
Perfect example, I was driving back from Mississippi yesterday, visiting family for Mother's Day, and I could only pick up the 3G network on my iPhone, and Instagram sucks on 3G. Okay, it's horrible. Nothing would load, and it was just not the same experience.
Your users could be visiting your site mainly from a mobile device. Is it really necessary to focus on what huge image you want to display in the background of your homepage? If you want to get this type of data for your site, we do offer Google Analytics and access to all of our customers. Simply put in a ticket with us and we'll get you set up. We also use heat map tool to identify what users are actually clicking on. So in the case of consumer ed, you can see that the hottest parts of the map are the search bar. It appeared as though most people were opting to just search for the information they need rather than digging through the somewhat cluttered homepage content. They did seem to also want to use the Ask Ed feature to find quick answers. But most people didn't make it past that section of icons in the center there, or to that additional consumer ed content. So it was taking up space that could have better been utilized for more important information. So combining our findings from Google Analytics, the insights gained from the heat map, along with actual questions that they'd received from users, we had a much clearer picture of who their audience was. This design doesn't alienate their core group of users, the people with families or individuals who already have a home or a car and just want more information as a consumer. But it also does not disregard the needs of the millennials they want to attract. Anyone is able to easily search for answers, use the Ask Ed feature, and actually see frequently asked questions to certain topics rather than just the icons to represent them. So we see what can be done when we have data-driven research about who our users are, how much more clear our picture becomes. We are now able to show consumer ed that their users are everyday people dealing with real life issues and distractions and need answers to information, not big, flashy graphics and a ton of content to dig through. But we can take our analysis even further by putting our product, whether it be a website or a mobile application, in the hands of an actual user. Gathering real individuals based on what you know about our users is an ideal way to get an even more insight into areas to improve your content, your design, the services you offer, and even the way you offer them. This is important because it can save your team a lot of time, effort, and money from the very beginning. So our team offers this type of usability testing. We start off with what's called a heuristic evaluation, where we take a look at your site or application and look at it from a set of accepted usability principles, which is then used to base and is a base for identifying any potential usability issues your customers could face. So, can your users understand what's going on? Is their interface consistent with real world scenarios? Will they be confused by any actions that they have to take on the website? Are you using familiar terms when you're communicating with your constituents? Is the design clean and concise? While performing certain actions on the interface, do users have the freedom to move about the interface if they make a mistake? Did you provide a clearly marked exit if they do? Do they have the flexibility to do more or less? For example, sharing a file with one person or multiple people, all from the same screen. Is it efficient?
Recognition over recall. Do they know what's going on at all times? Or do they have to recall information from a previous screen to now they're on a new screen and have to remember something that was on another screen?
And what kind of feedback is your interface providing for your users? Do they know what's going on and where they are within the interface at all times? Do you allow users to recognize and recover from any errors that they encounter and provide any help verbiage that is easy to understand in case they get totally stuck? So using this heuristic evaluation, we can come up with a set of use case scenarios, ways your users would actually interact with the site or application in the real world. We brainstorm situations in which users would need to come to your site or app and evaluate the usability of the interface for them to be able to accomplish their goals. So let's jump into a project that we did with Department of Child Support Services, excuse me. So I want to share this next example with you because it demonstrates lessons we feel all digital products can learn from. So the Department of Child Support Services developed an app with the goal of allowing users to access case information and pay their child support straight from their mobile phone. The business need for this app was to lower call center costs as well as visits to the DCSS offices by providing a more convenient way for users to pay and get information they would otherwise have to interact with a caseworker or office employee to get. So kudos to them for reaching out to us after seeing some of the things we were doing with usability testing and accessibility testing to make sure that this app was something that their users would actually benefit from. They saw the importance of this type of testing. But because our team was asked to come in at the end of the project after the app had already been developed, the design of the layout was not really informed by data regarding who their actual customer base was. They didn't know the kinds of barriers that their users faced in regards to accessibility. They had no idea what mattered most to their users about the process of paying their child support or interacting with the DCSS officers. So that's one lesson we can take before we get into any of the findings. Conduct your testing from the very beginning of the project. Get that data to start informing your decision making early on in the process. So one very important issue our usability testing uncovered was flaws in the login process. Many of our users didn't know if they needed to make a new account or use the credentials they already used to access the desktop version of the app. The app provided little instruction in that regard. And once they did realize that they needed to register to use the app, they didn't know what the different IDs and pieces of information they needed were. So the process became very cumbersome. They also were instructing people to take a screenshot of the ID they received after registering to use later on in the login process. So I want to describe their users just a bit. Many of the non-custodial parents, the ones who would be using the app the most to make child support payments, were men. Many of them had older phones, and some didn't have the cognitive ability to fully operate them.
So now we're telling people who aren't comfortable using their own devices to take a screenshot, which a couple of them didn't know how to do.
And they were usually under the circumstance of being pressed for time, as many of them have to leave work to make these child support payments. So now we want them to possibly have to take out a sheet of paper and write that ID down, further prolonging an already tedious process. The stress of missing hours really came into play as completing some of the tasks we gave them became frustrating. All very important factors to make informed decisions about the design of this app. So another lesson, keep your processes simple. Don't add unnecessary steps and make it familiar with any other type of login process that someone would encounter while browsing the internet or using another service. So don't bog your users down with too many steps. Keep it simple. Another issue we uncovered was the visibility or lack thereof of system status. Basically, letting a user know where they are within the application at all times. One of the main functions of the app, making child support payments, actually took the user away from the app itself into a browser window. This clearly changes the entire interface and could easily confuse someone using the app. 1 second you're in the mobile app, the next you're in a browser with absolutely no warning and no instruction on how to get back to the app. So do I use the back button built into the hardware of my phone? Do I use the navigation arrows at the top of the screen? People are already pretty wary of providing information to the government. Now factor in the perceived vulnerability of the information on a mobile device and the overall confusion this scenario caused, and you're looking at users giving up on the app entirely and just walking into a DCS office to talk to a human instead.
So another issue with making the payments is that they didn't know that it was a $2 charge to make the payment through the app until the very end of the process. So that also made people back out.
So consistency is key. A lot of users didn't realize that because the process for signing up for this app, that the app and the online desktop version were essentially the same, and that $2.50 fee would be the same. But since they're on a mobile device, they thought that maybe it would be different and more convenient, and therefore they wouldn't have to pay that fee. So just make sure it's consistent. Make sure that the online interface matches or resembles closely to the mobile app interface, and that the processes there are consistent. Lastly, an issue we uncovered was with the accessibility of network speeds required to use this app. So for this tester, using his phone that still had the screen protector cover on it from when he purchased the phone, had a hard time logging in and needed to edit his security questions because he forgot his password. Notice that he enters answers, but can't see where the actual questions were on the screen. That's because the phone was using a poor Wi-Fi connection and the drop downs with the list of questions wasn't fully loading. Even though there's an error message there, he didn't understand what that meant. It's a very vague message. He didn't know if it was something he had done wrong or something that was wrong with the app itself. The error doesn't really tell us that. It took this user in particular, about 44 minutes to attempt to register and log in to the app, and he eventually gave up. He wasn't able to even use the app at all. So obviously, a huge issue for people in rural areas of Georgia who don't get the top internet speeds. And vague messages like these don't help the user understand what to do next, and will usually result in a lot of frustration, and no one will want to use this app. So, last lessons. Our users don't speak developer. Don't leave it up to your developers to come up with verbiage for your interface. Vague error messages and instructions that only a super techie person would understand is no help to your typical user. So here's a video that I want to share of the guy, and this is before we even start testing, and you can sort of get an idea of his frustrations from the beginning. This is us just explaining to him what the testing will entail, what we'd like him to do. And before we even tell him to do any tasks within the app, you can already get an idea of this guy's ability to use his phone and perform these actions.
One of the things we would request you is while you're doing that, if you could just think out loud. Because a lot of times, like...
You sure you want me to do that?
You know, be
Well, I'm
honest.
using it.
Be honest. Seriously. Absolutely.
I'm gonna need a spot to throw my phone.
We haven't designed this. We are literally a neutral party just to kind of see that, how well this app is from a usability perspective. So we can just be objective in compiling all of our findings and then giving it to the people who have designed it.
I'll try to keep it G-rated though.
Sure, thank you.
So again, before we even start, this guy already has a barrier facing him. He doesn't really know how to use his own phone. So he's saying, I don't want to talk out loud because I might get super frustrated and say something inappropriate. And that's even before we ask him to perform actions on an application that he's never used before. So this testing like this really gives you an idea of who your typical users are. And this guy would be one of the typical users in Georgia. So touching back on Nikhil's reference to citizen journey mapping as well, through usability testing with actual people test driving the product, we're really able to obtain a much deeper understanding of who our users are, their pain points, their frustrations, the why behind the choices that they make, and what they really need from us as a government agency providing a service for them. We can dive deeper with the evidence this testing with the evidence of this testing to map, the user's journey while using this app. Really take into account the insights about your users and apply them to the experiences that they've had or an action that they've taken. This will complete the picture for your organization. Seeing these testers' reaction to blank screens and experiencing their feeling of defeat after spending 45 minutes to log in really allows us to map the journey and empathize with the users in a way that is really unique to the usability testing. This citizen journey mapping is another great way to engage organization with the user's experience and identifying shortcomings in the way that they operate. So just to recap and some takeaways for you. So who is our audience? Typically, they're on much older devices. They don't have the latest iPhone or Android device, and most certainly don't have the huge displays like we have in our office or those MacBooks with the Retina displays. They have to rely on slower, less reliable internet speeds.
We have pretty good internet speeds in our offices. Inside the perimeter, we got Google Fiber. We can get super fast internet.
A lot of our users are outside of Atlanta city limits or even outside of Metro Atlanta and only have their phones to access the internet. So they're more likely on an older cellular network using Wi-Fi, which can be a barrier if this is not taken into account early on in the development process. And they're way less tech savvy than we think. They're not me, they're not you. They don't use the internet every day. So don't assume your users will be able to interpret your interface design in the same way that you or your developers do. More takeaways. Before you start building a site or application, be sure you're building it based on user research and data and not on feelings and assumptions. It's so important to understand before you start adding colors and branding and design and everything to your site, who your users are.
So conduct usability testing at the beginning of your development process.
Don't wait until you've already built the entire application and you're ready to launch before you start thinking about whether or not people will be able to actually use the app or navigate the website. So focus on your core constituency and ways to serve them. Use that non-empirical and empirical data from personas, empathy, and citizen mapping, and usability testing to make informed decisions. Your citizen journey maps and should almost be a poster on the wall in your office to remind you, who it is you're working for. What is the goal? And that is providing the best possible service to the users that depend on us the most. So thank you guys.
You guys have any questions?
I have a question, I have a comment. I think he kept that sticker on not to protect his screen, but to help him remember what each of those buttons are actually for.
Yeah.
Right there, that's your user.
Yes, exactly.
He doesn't care what happens with the phone. He just wants to know what those buttons are for.
Because the phone had been through it. It was 14 first. He's used it a lot. So, absolutely, exactly. That's a very good observation. He probably kept that on there to say, hey, this is how you turn on the volume. He was one of those users that was not going to be able to take a screenshot of that screen like it was instructed. So, great observation.
So Jasmine, what all's involved in you were saying do your user testing before you develop? Is that where you just do a lot of data analysis, or do you talk to users, or what do you do?
So the user testing I'm talking about in particular is actually getting that product, whether it's totally finished or not, totally designed or not, in the hands of a user. So then you can start to make those finalized decisions before you launch. Okay, I know that our developers need to do X, Y, and Z before we launch, and not go back after the site has, or the application has already been pretty much completed and they're ready to launch, to sort of make those decisions. But you can also talk to customers, but knowing who your customers are first and foremost, because if you're just putting it in the hands of a bunch of developers, even though they may not be, your developers, they're going to breeze through that quickly. You got to get the application in front of people who you know will actually be using your website and your services. So yes, getting that information, building those personas, building those entity maps, and understanding who it is that your audience is key to this usability testing. Does that answer? Okay. All right. Cool. Thank you guys.
Thank you for sticking around again, and I hope that you got some really valuable information from understanding who your users are. If you need that type of usability testing that we talked about, visit this portal link here and put in a ticket. And again, thank you.